Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Bonsai Boy, but my friends call me Bon, and today I'd like to talk about a game that for better or worse has taken the world by storm in the short time since its release, Palworld. While I was incredibly skeptical at first glance and have some concerns we'll talk about towards the end, I wanted to take this chance to say my piece on a game that I have no doubt has already changed the trajectory of the industry in ways we may not see the results of for years to come. But have no doubt, Palworld matters for plenty of reasons, some of which I hope to make clear in this video. Now before we get started, I want to acknowledge that Palworld is an early access title, otherwise known as a game preview on Xbox and the Microsoft Store. With that came a certain expectation of bugginess or jank, especially given my friend Lemon and I played it at release. Now I am someone who has spent countless hours on early access titles since Steam first introduced them to me years ago. And before that, I played alpha and beta builds of Minecraft at the recommendation of a friend when I was no older than 12. My point is that over the years, I developed a certain tolerance for jank. So keep that in mind when I say that I didn't experience any major issues that detracted from my enjoyment. Whether that can be chalked up to my expectations and familiarity with early access, I can't say for certain, and so I'll defer to Lemon, who has not spent as much time with games like this, when they say,
"It's rough."
As for myself, I only found the low quality sound effects and some wonky NPC behaviors like poor pathfinding or just not responding to what's happening to be particularly obtrusive. While immersion breaking, they didn't really bring down the overall experience, and I'm even hesitant to mention them given how obvious it is that these are just placeholders. For reference, I played on an Xbox Series X while Lemon played on PC, and we didn't have any issues connecting via Microsoft Crossplay as we both accessed it through Game Pass. Now with that out of the way, let's dive into the wonderful world of Pals. It's clear from very early on that Palworld is an incredibly ambitious and triumphant blending of the survival and monster collecting genres. I struggle to believe it myself, but this game honestly captures the same magical sense of adventure originally promised to myself and children all over the world by Pokemon more than 2 decades ago, but with all the advancements in game design that even a small indie studio has access to these days. This game, even in its hilariously janky pre-release state, is so successful in realizing that childhood dream of going on an adventure alongside a party of colorful monster companions that I'm a little dumbfounded to know it's an early access title released by a Japanese indie developer. Given the sheer ambition on display, I'm still in shock that much of its gameplay and mechanics function at all. The real highlight of this is in how they work in tandem with one another relatively seamlessly. All of the overlapping systems at play and the many different ways you're encouraged to interact with the world and its core mechanics are pretty remarkable all things considered. And this is most clear in the central focus of the game, the Pals. Small aside, my favorite scenes in the Pokemon films and TV shows were always the ones that showed Ash and the gang sitting around a makeshift camp laughing as their Pokemon play with each other, or the transitional scenes that depicted how Pokemon helped out and made life better for people in just day-to-day tasks. I think the real joy of these moments was in how they showed the Pokemon and their trainers simply sharing the world together. So then, I'm sure you can follow why I was so incredibly happy to see that the Pals in Palworld are the absolute epitome of this idea. Well, that is if you're not put off by the self-aware and somewhat dark sense of humor. But I found it really made the absurdity of the premise click. I'd have personally found it hard to ignore if a game where you can give a chipmunk a gun or fire a penguin out of a rocket launcher were too self-serious. While the treatment of Pals may be easily interpreted as cruel, at the end of the day, the developers have really done a wonderful job making the Pals endearing in their helpfulness, in spite of their tongue-in-cheek presentation of the premise. This was originally supposed to be the first video in a new co-op series, and I'll get to why that changed shortly, but having said that, I did have a friend with me on this joyful journey of jank. As mentioned earlier, I was accompanied by none other than the one and only professional gamer I know, a true champion of people, the wallflower with the power of golden sour. It was Lemon. Say hi, Lemon.
Nom, nom, nom.
Lemon won a prize of monetary value from a competitive video game tournament, and is therefore a professional gamer. You may disagree, and that's okay, because you're wrong. Moving on, I asked pro gamer Lemon what they thought of Palworld after our first 2 days with it, and this is what they had to say.
I mean, I like it. Obviously, I keep wanting to play it.
Now, as for why this game didn't end up being the first episode of my upcoming co-op series, truth be told, Lemon and I were each so individually invested in our own goals while playing that we oftentimes weren't really cooperating, so much as just sharing a home base and occasionally helping each other out with things like boss fights or resource gathering. But that really speaks to just how smooth the co-op integration is. We were free to play the game together as much or as little as we felt necessary at any given moment. One of the best parts of this was going out on our own independent adventures and then excitedly showing each other whatever new pals we had captured on the way.
Whoa! Oh.
This also extended to hatching eggs once we unlocked the incubator, as we would wait until the other person was around to see what we'd got. One of my favorite moments in the game that I unfortunately failed to record was when my largest pal egg to date hatched into the derpy dino mascot featured in the trailers, Relaxorus. Getting back to the benefits of the co-op experience, all of our resources and pals could be shared, though we did have to exchange pals in a somewhat roundabout way. But it wasn't something we needed to do often, and it wasn't too tedious. Another huge convenience facilitated by co-op was being able to choose some different options in the tech tree, because between the two of us, it was easy to always have any essential tools or crafting stations unlocked. As a result, I spent a decent chunk of time experimenting with what both Lemon and I agree is probably the coolest thing in general: PAL integration. Now, what do I mean by PAL integration? Well, consider for a second the classic catching and battling formula of Pokemon. For the most part, Pokemon exist to be used in battle and very rarely interact with the game worlds beyond that, the exception being some of the newer traversal mechanics, some flavor interactions like the picnics, and the age-old HMs. That is to say that they aren't all that deeply integrated into the game world outside of very specific gameplay loops. While in Palworld, interaction with the world is at the heart of everything that makes the pals special. The majority of them have their own player-activated special ability, ranging from simple things like being commanded to use a special attack, to more interactive things like using the pals themselves as gliders. This is one of the ways you can facilitate some of the sillier things we mentioned earlier, like the penguin rocket launcher, but the real highlight of this mechanic is the ability to ride a sizable range of different pals. When riding a pal, you benefit from their increased movement speed, as well as gain manual control and aim of their attacks, which they would normally use on their own while fighting alongside you. And best of all, you can of course ride a number of the flying pals through the sky, and they naturally don't take falling damage. From the co-op side of things, these were mine and Lemon's other favorite thing to show each other. We'd often work towards a riding saddle or pal-related piece of equipment quietly, and then excitedly reveal to the other what our latest creation let our pal do. This is all alongside the fact that, as mentioned earlier, the pals also act as laborers back at your base, being able to speed up your own building and gathering tasks, as well as being assigned to perform them alone while you take care of other things. On top of pals having different types and moves like you'd expect, they also have a wide range of labor-related skills that determine what they can or can't help with back at the base. You'll need pals with the woodcutting skill to work a logging camp, or fire pals to heat the smelter and cooking pot, or water pals to spin the water wheel at the mill. As you progress, harvesting pals are needed to plant berries and wheat, and from the very start, a wide range of pals have the skill handiwork, which as mentioned above, allows them to assist in your crafting and build things either alongside you or by themselves. I think it's especially cool and cute to see a bunch of little pals run over to help you build something, and then watch the time it takes shrink dramatically as each one swings their little hammers. There is no other way to put it than that this is the Pokemon game I dreamt of as a child but had grown to accept would unlikely ever be made as an adult. I have loved Pokemon my entire life, and identified as a fan of the franchise before I could really even say I was a fan of video games. In spite of my growing distance from the franchise over the years, I even had a great time with Violet and put over 100 hours into it. Much like I am with Palworld, I was able to look past its myriad performance issues, at least for the sake of my own enjoyment, and had a great time team building and climbing the ranked ladder to reach Master Ball rank in VGC doubles. But what it and nearly every Pokemon game released in the past decade failed to provide me with was a genuine sense of adventure. I felt hardly any closer to experiencing the Pokemon journey of my dreams than I did as a child. In spite of what was now an open world with Pokemon wandering around the environment in real time, I still struggled to develop any attachment to the world of my Pokemon until I started team building for competitive play. Say what you will about the design of the pals in Palworld, but I was shocked by how quickly and easily this game encouraged me to develop an attachment to my growing stable of creatures. This all comes together to take what is at its core a relatively beginner-friendly and non-abrasive survival game and turn it into the creature-collecting adventure I've always wanted, even if it wasn't from the series that first inspired my love of games and fantasy worlds all those years ago. While I'd normally end a video on a note similar to that one, Palworld is a special case as the subject of my first video on an early access title. But more than that, as many of you probably know, it's in a particularly unique position being an unprecedented smash hit from an indie studio that is also faced with a sizable controversy directed at the designs of its creatures. Designs that very well may prove to be the product of unethical development practices, or could just as easily all be washed away in the coming weeks. What's important to keep in mind is that at least at the time of writing and recording this video, every accusation directed at Palworld is just that, an accusation. If these accusations prove true, then I stand with the artists and developers who would be rightfully condemning the use of unethical business practices in the making of this game. However, I do believe in the spirit of due process, and that it is the responsibility of those who make a claim to prove said claim. It is not on the rest of the world or the accused to discredit these accusations. Regardless of how this controversy unfolds, I want to close with what I posit in the thumbnail, the idea of why Palworld matters. Palworld, above all else, has demonstrated that the longing for a truly modern reimagining of what a Pokemon adventure can be is clearly shared by millions of passionate gamers around the world. Pokemon changed the trajectory of my life, and I'm sure countless others, and now Palworld has seemingly cracked the code on how to recreate that magic by cleverly smashing together many elements from many popular games. If it ultimately proves to be guilty of the accusations being thrown its way, then I have no doubt one of the many clones of it that were fast-tracked into development this week at studios around the world will take its place. And if not, then I suspect Palworld has a long and exciting future ahead that I'll be sure to follow going forward. Whatever the legacy of this game ultimately proves to be, you can be certain that we'll all be seeing a lot more like it in the coming years. And if any of them are half as much fun as this has been, then you can be certain I'll be ready to share them with you. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ding the little bell if you want to be notified of my next video. I also do variety game streaming 5 days a week starting at 12 PM Pacific Standard Time, which is where I capture my gameplay footage used in these videos and play through the games covered on this channel. Link to my Twitch channel, Discord, and more in the description. Thanks again, and see you next time.